The scream shattered the quiet of Oakwood Meadows just as the sun dipped below the horizon, a piercing cry that sent birds scattering from the manicured trees lining the street. I froze mid-step on my front porch, keys dangling in my hand, my heart slamming against my ribs. It was my mother's voice, raw, terrified, unmistakable. Dropping everything, I sprinted toward the house, the groceries I'd been carrying spilling across the lawn. The front door was ajar, and as I burst inside, I found her crumpled at the base of the stairs, her walker tipped over, her face pale with pain. "Mom!" I shouted, dropping to my knees beside her. Her eyes, wide with fear, locked onto mine. "The button," she gasped, her voice trembling. "It's gone." That moment was the spark that ignited a war I never saw commingle war, not just with a VYC or a rule, but with a woman named Cynthia Reynolds, the iron-fisted queen of the Oakwood Meadows Homeowners Association. What began as a simple safety measure for my mother would spiral into a battle of wills, exposing the dark underbelly of suburban perfection and landing me in a fight I couldn't afford to lose. Levying in Oakwood Meadows wasn't my dream. The cookie-cutter houses, the identical mailboxes painted in meadow beige, the lawns mowed to a precise 2.5 in Chesit all felt like a stage set for a life I didn't want. But when my mother, Eleanor, needed a single-story home after her hip replacement surgery, I swallowed my pride and signed a mortgage. At 68, she was fiercely independent, but her recovery demanded a space where she could move safely. The house was perfect for her. Wide doorways, no stairs except the small step at the entry, and a layout that let her navigate with her walker. Still, I worried. My job as a project manager kept me away for long hours, and the thought of her alone, vulnerable, gnawed at me. That's why I installed the emergency call button by the front door, a sleek, unobtrusive VYC that could summon paramedics with one press. It was a lifeline, a promise that help was always within reach. I never imagined it would make me a target. Cynthia Reynolds introduced herself at the new resident orientation, a mandatory ritual held in the community center's overly air-conditioned meeting room. She was in her late 50s, with a platinum bob so sharp it could cut glass and eyes that seemed to catalog every imperfection. "Welcome to Oakwood Meadows," she said, her smile as warm as a winter gale. "We pride ourselves on our standards. I ensure every resident complies with our bylaws." The way she lingered on, I made it clear she wasn't just the HOA president, she was the law. Her clipboard, ever present, was her scepter, and she wielded it with the zeal of a dictator. For months, I stayed off her radar. I mowed my lawn on schedule, hid my trash cans by 5:59 p.m., and even repainted my mailbox when a chip revealed a forbidden shade of gray. But the emergency button changed everything. I'd hired a professional to install it, ensuring it blended seamlessly with the house's exterior, a small white box, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. It was a precaution, nothing more, until Cynthia decided it was a declaration of war. I was unloading my car after a grueling day when she appeared, materializing like a specter in pressed khakis and a pastel cardigan. "Mr. Harper," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, "you've made an unauthorized alteration to your property." She pointed at the button, her manicured nail trembling with indignation. I blinked, caught off guard. "It's an emergency call system for my mother," I explained, keeping my tone even. "She had hip surgery. It's for her safety." Cynthia's lips pursed into a line so thin it could have sliced bread. "Section 14, Paragraph 3 of the Community Guidelines," she recited, tapping her clipboard. "All exterior modifications require approval from the Architectural Committee. You didn't submit a request." I stared, dumbfounded. "It's a medical necessity," I said, a headache blooming behind my eyes. "It's smaller than a light switch. You can barely see it from a street. Rules are rules, Mr. Harper." She handed me a violation notice, her flourish suggesting she was presenting an award rather than a punishment. "Remove it by Friday, or you'll face a due loss $75 daily fine. The committee meets next month if you wish to plead your case." She turned on her heel, Leah VYing me, clutching the paper, my frustration simmering into something darker. Inside, I found Mom at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. I explained the situation, expecting her to be as outraged as I was. Instead, she sighed. "Maybe we should just move it inside," she said softly. "I don't want trouble." But I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear I'd heard in her scream that evening when she'd slipped on the entry step, only to find the buttons still there. Thank God. That fear fueled me. This wasn't just about a button. It was about her safety, her dignity. I wasn't backing down. That night, I dove into research, scouring HOA regulations and federal laws. The Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was clear. Reasonable accommodations for medical needs trumped petty aesthetic rules. Armed with this, I drafted a letter citing the ADA, attaching Mom's medical records and a doctor's note emphasizing the button's necessity. I delivered it to Cynthia's mailbox at dawn, certified and signature required, knowing she couldn't ignore it. I expected a quick resolution. I was wrong. 2 days later, a response was taped to my door, the HOA's embossed seal glaring at me. "Request denied," it read. "The aesthetic harmony of Oakwood Meadows is paramount. Consider an interior system or a wearable WYC." Cynthia's signature sprawled across the bottom like a taunt. I crumpled the paper, my blood boiling. Wearable WYCs were unreliable for Mom. She often forgot to wear them, and they could fail in a fall. An interior system wouldn't help if she collapsed outside. This wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal of her safety. I requested an emergency HOA board meeting, determined to appeal to reason where Cynthia had none. The meeting was held in the community center, a sterile room with flickering fluorescent lights. I arrived with a folder of EVY Denke, the ADA text, Mom's medical documentation, and photos of other approved modifications to Garish Garden Gnome, a neon mailbox that somehow passed muster. The 5 board members sat stone-faced as Cynthia opened the meeting. "Mr. Harper has violated our bylaws with an unapproved modification," she said, her tone implying I'd spray-painted the house neon pink. I presented my case, calm but firm, emphasizing the button's minimal impact and legal protections. The board listened, some nodding, others scribbling notes. I thought I had them until Cynthia spoke. "While Mr. Harper's concerns are noted," she said, while VYing a dismissive hand, "allowing this sets a dangerous precedent. Next, we'll have ramps, signs, medical equipment cluttering our streets. Oakwood Meadows will look like a clinic, not a community." Her words were absurd, but they worked. When she called for a vote to uphold the violation, 3 hands joined hers. The 2 dissenters looked apologetic, but said nothing. "Remove it by Friday," Cynthia declared, her smile triumphant. I left the meeting shaking with rage. This wasn't about aesthetics. It was about power. Cynthia wasn't protecting property values. She was protecting her throne. I contacted a lawyer, Sarah Klein, who specialized in HOA disputes and disability law. She confirmed the HOA was violating federal law and drafted a second letter, this time with her letterhead and a warning of legal action. I sent it to the board, copying Cynthia, and waited. Surely, they backed down. Friday arrived, and I left for work, the button still in place. I'd told Mom to call me if anyone approached the house. At 3 p.m., my phone rang. "James," she said, her voice trembling. They took it. I raced home, my pulse pounding. The button was gone, Leah VYing only screw holes in the siding. A violation notice was taped in its place, stating the HOA had remedied the issue and billed me due lot $200 for the Sarah VYC. Mom sat on the couch, her hands shaking. "A woman, Cynthia, came with 2 men in uniforms," she said. "They said it was authorized. I told them it was for my safety, but they wouldn't listen." The image of Cynthia on my property, ordering the removal of a medical WYC while my mother, vulnerable and alone, watched helplessly, pushed me past anger into fury. This wasn't a dispute anymore. It was personal. I called Sarah, who at VY said filing a police report for trespassing and theft, and contacting Adult Protective Care VYCS, APS, for the removal of a medical safety VYC. The police arrived that evening, a young officer named Torres taking our statements. He examined the screw holes, the notice, and my documentation. HOA disputes are usually CIVYL, he said, but removing medical equipment from a disabled person's home? That's a crime. The next morning, an APS caseworker named Linda arrived. She was no nonsense, her notepad filling with details as Mom recounted the incident. Interfering with a vulnerable adult's medical equipment is serious, Linda said. This could be considered neglect or abuse under state law. She promised swift action, and she delivered. By Monday, she'd contacted the HOA's insurance provider, the county housing authority, and Cynthia's employer, a high-end real estate firm, where her HOA antics didn't exactly align with their client-first branding. The fallout was swift. On Tuesday evening, I opened my door to find Officer Torres, Linda, and another officer on my porch. "Is Cynthia Reynolds here?" Torres asked. I frowned. "She lives on Meadow Lane, end of the cul-de-sac." He nodded, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "We know. We just come from there." MS. Reynolds has been arrested for criminal trespass, theft, and endangerment of a vulnerable adult. Can you and your mother provide his statements tomorrow? I stood there, stunned. Arrested? Linda stepped forward. The DA's taking this seriously. Removing a medical VYC from an elderly person's home isn't a small matter, especially from someone in her position. Word spread through Oakwood Meadows like wildfire. Neighbors texted, called, whispered over fences. Cynthia Reynolds, the untouchable HOA queen, had been led from her pristine home in handcuffs, her blonde bob disheveled, her authority shattered. The HOA board scrambled, calling an emergency meeting that week. Without Cynthia's iron grip, they folded. They approved the button's reinstallation, waived the fines, and offered to cover the cost of a new system. They also voted to remove Cynthia as president, effective immediately. But Cynthia's troubles were just beginning. The charges were severe. Criminal trespass carried up to 6 months in jail, theft another 6, and endangerment of a vulnerable adulta, felony could mean 5 years. At her arraignment, I sat in the courtroom, watching as she stood before the judge, her usual composure replaced by disbelief. Her attorney's plea for dismissal was shot down, and bail was set at $20,000. As she was led away, still insisting she was just enforcing the rules, I felt no pity, only relief. The button was reinstalled the next week, and Mom's confidence returned, though she still glanced at the door sometimes, as if expecting another intrusion. Oakwood Meadows changed too. The board, chastened, said their bylaws to prioritize medical accommodations. Neighbors, once silent, began questioning other absurd rules. Cynthia's reign had exposed the fragility of her power, and the community was better for it. As for me, I learned a hard lesson. Sometimes the smallest fights over a button, a rule, a principle are the ones that matter most. And sometimes, standing up to a tyrant, no matter how petty, can spark a reckoning no one sees coming. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.